Don't fall for his flattering tune. He'll promise you the world until you drink that perfume. It's a highway, highway to the door, and a neon Medusa's got your heart. Sweet canyon lullabies, don't look straight into its eyes. It's a highway, highway to the door. There's only two ways to make it in this town. One is to be brilliant, the other is to drown. Don't take both drugs all in one go. You can't reach the heavens passed out on the floor. It's a highway, highway to the door, and a neon Medusa's got your heart. Sweet canyon lullabies, don't look straight into its eyes. It's a highway, highway to the door. If your mama could see you now, if your mama could see you now, topless and upside down, spinning around. If your mama could see you now, with the party lines coming out, are you lost or are you found? And there are too many mirrors in this Don't fall in love with the man on stage. I'll be on in a minute, then I'll sweep you away. Don't fall for the monsters in this maze, but I could love you forever if you'd meet my gaze. Don't fall in love with the man It's a highway, highway to the door. And a neon Medusa's got your heart. Sweet canyon lullaby. Don't look straight into its eyes.
Hello, welcome back. Yes, we're back doing more painting for Spooky Month. So we're gonna finish off our skeletons. I've also grabbed a couple of other painted models that were up on the shelf and thrown them down in front of my camera just so people can have a look at things. But yeah, today I figured we didn't really get to it last time, but I've got my guys queued up and I figured we'll do some dry brushing. I was talking about how I really wanted to dry brush these guys and get a rust effect on them. Hopefully we'll start with this guy. He's a bit unfortunate. I put a little bit too much undercoat on his shield, so I don't know if you can see it. Let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, you can kind of see his the detail on his shield's gotten a little bit clogged up. Now that's unfortunate, but it's not really going to matter too much, because when we dry brush it, it'll just look like rusty metal anyway, and rusty metal kind of clogs up the detail anyway. Because of the way rust effectively grows as it oxidizes, you get some very interesting shape. Yeah, English Ando. Changes in shape when metal actually rusts. So hopefully that will just look like rusty old metal when we're done with it. It's interesting. A lot of people recommend using what's called Dirty Down for making rust, which is it's a solution. It contains, I believe, some form of it's a ferric compound. It's an iron-based compound in an oxidizing agent. So the idea is you paint it on to your object, and then it reacts with oxygen and forms genuine rust. And it is very convincing, and it does look very good. But I've always been torn on it because I see people using it on miniatures, and it clogs up the detail like real rust would. But it always puts me out a little bit because I'm like, I spent good money on these miniatures. I paid for that detail. I want to be able to see it. So I prefer to do rust with the Painterly method. So we're going to start out by, once again, dry brushing, as I said. So with a little bit of Gorthor Brown. So give our Gorthor Brown a shake. It has been in my drawer for a little bit. Actually, no, I changed my mind. We won't start with Gorthor. We'll go with Doombolt. Baking ASMR. How's that for a mix? Doombolt's one of those funny ones. Sometimes it likes to separate funny. Alright, so we'll get some Doombolt out. Just loading it straight onto our dry brush. Now, obviously, we're dry brushing, so we're not actually going to be thinning this down. So instead, I'm just going to spread it out on my bit of paper towel there. And that's close to the consistency we want to look for. Now, usually what I do is when I unload my brush on the paper, I then use my finger. Okay, that's a little bit too light. I'll use my finger to kind of gauge how much it is. And I find doing that is a better gauge than, yeah, that's looking about right, than using the paper. Because I find sometimes the paper will leave blobs of paint on the brush, which will then be actually too heavy when we actually get to applying it. Just gonna come in with a dry brush. Start building up our layers again. That's a little bit too light. Do want to build up a good amount of color here, because generally I find on your first dry brush you can go pretty heavy. You want to gradually get lighter. Because rust is a very interesting thing. So steel oxidizes, or iron should I say, oxidizes differently depending on the environmental conditions and the nature of the steel that it's rusting, how much steel there is there. So we've started very dark on this, which means that it's probably been in the ground, and you can already see it's a lot brighter now. We started quite dark on this, so very dark rust usually has been in the ground or in an oxidizing environment for some time, and it's usually rusted quite slowly. Very, very bright rust, so very bright orange and sometimes even yellow rust, usually occurs on thinner parts of metal, and it tends to have happened much faster, much more recent. It tends to be more of like a powdery finish as opposed to a flake. So you can use different colors and different combinations of colors to create different looks of rust on your model. I'm going to be building up to a fairly bright rust, just because I like the look of it. I could have gone for a very ancient look on these guys and just gone with dark rust. But I also figured that thematically, these are the Cursed City skeletons. Ulfin Khan has not always been a city of the dead. These guys used to be basically the city guards, and they only really became undead thralls after Radakar took over the city. So I figured that they would only be kind of relatively recently added to the ranks of the dead and just kind of left to rust in peace. I figured, so that came on a little bit heavy, but that's okay. So we want it to be messy here, and it's okay to have some bright patches. We want it to be nice and uneven as well. Because as I said, metal rusts differently depending on what areas are exposed. So say it's been lying in puddle, you know, the water that covers one area will make it rust slower than the metal that's exposed to the air. Well, that's a lot. That's a little bit too heavy. Not a problem. Again, it'll look fine once we do our extra work. The only thing you really need to try and avoid, and again, it's like with any dry brushing, all of the low areas we've kind of kept very dark, and that's what we want to keep. So like the dent in the chest plate and stuff, they've retained the original color. And that's what we want to preserve. Catch the high points as much as we can. So like for instance, this spike would be a very bright. So how thin it is. Let's load up a little bit more. Yeah, I find that you will need to reload your brush while you're dry brushing, but I try not to load up my my paper too much, because it will soak into the paper and dry up while you're working, and it's just a waste of paint. And anyone who does Warhammer for any length of time learns to hate wasting paint, especially considering the prices Games Workshop will charge for it. But yeah, I'm using a lot of the standard paints. I do really rate. I know a lot of people don't care for them, but I actually really like the dry paints from Games Workshop, and we will be using some of those later. I actually think it's a real shame that no other company has really, at least to my knowledge, no other company has really replicated that. So you can already see this guy's a lot brighter now, and that's really popping a lot more. And you can kind of see that hard edge on the front of the breastplate has been picked out there. He's looking pretty good, so we'll just reload our palette real quick and get his sword and his sabatons sorted out. One other thing that's also important to note when you're dry brushing is you do need to clean your dry brush out every so often. So we'll do that in a little bit, but yeah, be very, very careful to make sure that you don't get too much paint drying in your dry brush, because it will clog it up. And you want those bristles to be able to move freely, because that's what gives you, again, a lot of that movement to catch those various areas of detail in the miniature. Just some color on there. The camera actually picks this up a lot better than my eyes do. I'm looking at this and going, oh, this is very, very subtle, but if you actually look at the camera right now, of course you're looking at the camera, you're following the stream, it's looking a lot brighter than what I'm seeing. It may also be because the camera has a light mounted on it, so that may be washing it out a little bit. Another great one for dry brushing is actually makeup brushes. I have some of those, but they're a little bit big. I know Artist Opus makes some kind of pseudo makeup brushes for dry brushing, and everyone talks about how good they are, but I don't have any because I'm cheap. But just some regular makeup brushes, you can pick those up from just a local $2 shop or whatever. And they do really make for a fantastic dry brush. You just got to make sure you clean them, which is a little bit of a pain, because they have a lot more volume in their bristles and they tend to hold a lot more water. Let's get a bit more on. More on, he says. But yes, painting rust is actually one of my favorite things. I take any opportunity I can to make things rusty, because I was actually very tempted with these guys to go for a more Bronze Age look. Go with kind of copper or bronze armor, and then do it with verdigris. But I ain't gonna lie to you, I actually fucking hate painting verdigris. Games Workshop has a technical paint called Nihilakh Oxide. Some other companies make equivalent paints that I have as well. Every bronze or copper oxide paint that I've ever used is an absolute pain in the ass to deal with. They always give a very, very chalky finish. They're supposed to be used like a wash. Yeah, you're supposed to wash them into the recesses. I find they always give a very, very chalky finish. So you need to darken them down again with another wash. And that can have very strange effects. For instance, Nihilakh Oxide, in my experience, when you wash it with Seraphim Sepia, it is, or is it Griffin Sepia now? I can't remember, they changed the name. Yeah, when you wash it with Seraphim Sepia, it actually goes a very dark green, which I actually don't mind, but it's not the color that it went on as. So it has some very interesting behaviors depending on what washes you hit it with. All right, let's get this guy's shield. Now again, this is a very heavy dry brush. Oh, I got a little bit too much on his sleeve there. That's okay. We're going to come back and clean up the cloth and that anyway. And I actually don't really care too much if I get too much on the cloth or the bones, because that's the thing, like, rusty objects will leave rust marks on other things. So if it's just a little bit, I don't really care, because these guys walk around all day, every day in their rusty armor, patrolling the streets of Ulfenkarn. So I have no doubt that they would have rust stains not only on their armor, but on their vestments and on their bones. A bit on there. The trick to dry brushing is really, it's just repetition. It's just building up layers, and you can use different directional strokes. Like I'm doing a bit of a twirl here, but you can do that to build up texture. Now, texture is a funny word when it comes to miniature painting. It's had a bit of a revival in recent years, but for a long time, texture was a dirty word. No one wanted texture on their miniatures. Everyone wanted perfectly smooth paints with no brush marks, no texture, you know, flawless, unseeable brushwork, basically. So it used to all, for a while, it was all about acrylic thinners and wet palettes and stuff. But texture's kind of come back into vogue lately. That's a little bit heavy, but it doesn't matter. It's a little bit too heavy. Cut that back a little bit. Yes, texture's come back into vogue lately, and dry brushing can be very good for getting texture because of the directions you can add to the brush stroke. And so you can already see this guy again, like the other one, building up a lot more color on him. A lot more depth to that shield already. And again, like this as a basic job, like a little bit of dry brushing on the bones, and maybe some highlights on the cloth if you wanted to. This could easily be tabletop ready, and I haven't even done any washes to it. So painting is one of those things. If you've never tried it before, I heartily recommend you get into it, because I think it's a lot of fun. That's a little bit heavy, but that's okay. I really recommend Skeletons as a beginner's painting project, because they got a lot of detail, and it's very easy to pick up with things like dry brushing, simple washes, stuff like that. There's not a lot of complexity to them. Orcs are also a good one. It's like, that's not mist paint, that's just an extra bit of orkiness, it's a bit of character. Get those Sabatons done. That's the other thing as well. Probably overloaded this one a little bit, but once you've loaded your dry brush up a couple of times, it will start to hold paint for longer. There'll be more paint in amongst the bristles, so as kind of you work it around, you'll get that out. Okay, oh, there's a little thigh plate there that we missed. Get some color on that. Yes. And he's van brake. Okay, I think I've played it out. I think I'm out. Stock a little bit. Also good, I find, with a dry brush, because they are relatively flat, hold it sideways and do that just to get any excess off the edges, because sometimes I find the edges will carry a little bit extra paint, and that can often, when you go to brush it, it will glob off the side and thus create big smears, which you may not want. Again, with these skeletons, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes, particularly if you're dry brushing hair, having big globs come off can be a real pain, because it can get in the strands of the hair. A little bit, put a little bit more down there. Yeah, that's good. Feel the scale mail, very, very small pieces would have built up a lot more light oxidization. Yeah, as I said, you can really do anything. I'm doing my traditional orange rust here. So we'll go up to an orange. But I was very tempted to actually go with like an Avalon Sunset Hobgrot combination, and build up to a yellow. And I still might. We don't know. There we go. As you can see, the detail on these shields takes it very nicely. I was, as I said earlier, I was tempted to do kind of a more limited rust work on this, because you can see there's the bit where the edge around the shield here has kind of rotted away. I was actually kind of tempted to paint like this half as like pristine metal, and then had this part be rusty and kind of had the rust be spreading. But I decided no, we'll go for full rust. That's it. I like to paint it, and gives me an excuse to paint rust on stream. And that might be a little bit heavy, but I don't care, because we're preserving the divots in the armor. And that's the great thing about rust, is like, it can be inconsistent, but it will also be consistently inconsistent, right? It'll make everyone else in the unit, you know, that none of them will look identical, but they'll at least look cohesive. And it's a very liberating thing, I find. I know one of the big fears that can hold people back from getting into painting, and I know it was always a concern of mine back when I started out, was, well, what about repeatability? I can paint one model to look nice. How do I make every model in that box look nice? How do I make them all look the same? So again, rust is great for that, because you can make them look coherent. Everyone looks rusty, but they don't have to be identical. Okay, that's going to need a little bit more. Actually, give me 1 second. Okay, let's get some rust on there. I will say the quality of these sculpts certainly helps. Like, the detail on them is very conducive to what I'm trying to do. Which is one of the things I do love about modern models. Like, some of the classics are still classics. There are some models out there that, despite being 30, 40 years old, really do hold up. Like, again, I have it's sitting in a box over there. I haven't put it together yet, but I have the metal Archaon from Warhammer Fantasy on horse, and that model, like, absolutely fucking slaps. Absolute beast of a model. I need to get around to putting it together. That thing's like 20, 25 years old. Still holds up. But things you can do with modern sculpting and modern plastic is very impressive. Which is why actually I have some of the Archon Studios terrain, the Dungeons and Lasers kits and the Rampart kits. And I will say the surface detail sculpting in their stuff is very good. They have a lot of, like, their sci-fi ship interiors and stuff have a lot of dents, a lot of scratches, Like, again, little things that are very, very good for washes and dry brushing. Actually, I've got an unpainted piece, I think. So this is a corner piece from one of the Dungeons and Lasers sets. The idea is this sits in like a corner to kind of close off the square and, you know, make a choke point or whatever. But as you can see, if I bring the camera in, so you can see all those like scratches and everything. That's sculpted in detail, and you can also see like kind of the stippling of it. It's not a flat piece; it's uneven. And then of course you've got all the cabling and everything else, and all the, you know, deck mesh. So you hit that with, you know, some Iron Warriors or some bolt gun metal, and then a wash of, you know, Nuln Oil. That's going to get in everywhere and give you some really nice texture, some really good depth. And that's on the floor. I'll pick it up later. But that's sort of like, again, that illusion of depth. It's not something you could do on old school plastic kits. A bit more on that shield rim. But with modern technology, let's load up again. Oh, got some paint on my thumb. That's okay. It's looking good. Yeah, we got a little bit of brown on the cloth there, but that's fine. As I said earlier, rust stains things it comes into contact with. The only thing I don't like about some of these modern sculptors, when they do shit like this, they'll put a void next to the tip of the spear. That means that there's only a very, very small amount of plastic supporting this. So I'm trying very hard to dry brush this, not snap it, because I have done that to other models before. Whilst trying to paint them, I've actually wound up breaking pieces off, which sucks. To be fair, I've done it to metal models too, but usually with metal models, like I did it to my Lockheed Feltheart. But usually what happens with metal models, is it's the super glue that gives away. That's fine. Well, it's a pain, but it's fine because you can literally just super glue it back. But when the plastic snaps, it gets a little bit more awkward, because plastic will often bend before it snaps, so that can result in a little bit of butchery required to fix it, to cut out kind of some of the bent plastic and things like that. Shoulder guard. I think that guy's skull's supposed to be showing through the helmet. I don't know, maybe we'll go back and pick that out later, I don't know. Yeah, it's looking pretty good so far, if I do say so myself. And it's not like I've really got anyone else here to evaluate my models. No, Ando, you're wrong. That in fact looks like shit. And even if they did say that, they probably wouldn't be sticking around for very long. do not accept criticism in this house. I'll accept advice on my painting. I'm not that arrogant, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of people out there who fool themselves into thinking that there's a right way and a wrong way. You know, there are sensible and good practice. You know, things like thinning your paints, not letting them dry out, you know, taking care of your brushes. These are all sensible things. Some people, like, for instance, pre-shading and zenithal highlights, you know, all very popular at the moment. And sometimes if you don't do that, people freak out. What do you mean you're not zenithal shading? What do you mean you're not, oh, zenithal highlighting, zenithal shading, zenithal whatever, you know? What do you mean you're not doing dry brushes and glazes? That's how everyone paints their miniatures nowadays. Like, no. That's how you paint your miniatures. I paint mine differently, and that's the joy of the hobby. Everyone can do it differently. Remember, I was very lucky. I got my hands on a copy of Talking Miniatures, which has been released by Warlord Games. Interviews with a whole bunch of the old heads from Games Workshop and such. I remember they were talking about one fellow who used to gloss varnish all of his miniatures, but with very thick coats of gloss, so that they'd come out looking almost like they were made of porcelain. Well, that's a bit heavy, but that's fine. Which, again, wouldn't be my personal taste. But, yeah, if that's the look you want, then by all means. Who was it? I think it was... I remember who it was off the top of my head. It was one of the old GW painters. They were actually saying in their part of the book was that their preference is for a satin varnish on their miniatures as opposed to a matte varnish, which everyone seems to be fond of nowadays. And I can't say I disagree. I use matte varnish, and matte varnish looks good, but there is an appeal to having a satin finish as well. Pick up those heels. Yeah, okay, these guys are looking good. I'm gonna pop these guys off. Actually, I'll drop these guys over here, and I'll switch over to the other camera. While I load up the next bunch. Ooh, almost knocked my painting water over. I don't want to do that, because I've got a bunch of electricals on my desk, and it would be very messy. Alright. Ta-da! Yeah, the light's not quite as good, but you can see they've got a much more reddish tint to them now. I'm gonna wash out my dry brush while I can. Yes, I find that my dry brush tends to pick up a lot of excess paint. So I often soap it quite frequently in between painting sessions. I'll apply some brush cleaner. Which can be very good for the health of it, because again, dry brushes, as I said earlier, they can go from fine to ratty pretty quickly. You don't clear them out fast enough. Alright, there's one. Ooh. Actually, this guy, I'm gonna take a quick detour. gonna stop dry brushing for a second because this guy, the base coat brown on him, not enough. So I'm gonna crack open the wet palette. Let me just... Yeah. This other guy could probably do with a bit as well. I find with a dry brush, you do need a relatively strong base coat. Ah, fuck it. We'll do all of them. Yeah, why not? We'll do all of them. All right, go back. So as you can see, I've got my palette. I've got some Rhinoxide on the palette already from earlier. I'm gonna load up the brush. This is about getting a good even base coat down. Just so, because I find if you don't have an even base coat, at least a good base coat, when you dry brush, sometimes it can wind up looking extra chalky. Dry brushing always has a little bit of a reputation for being a bit chalky. And that can happen depending on what paint you're using and how well you're, applying it. But I find if you haven't sufficiently base coated, that will increase the likelihood of getting chalkiness in my experience. Because what I find is that you can kind of see those streaks of missing color through it. That's the thing. Paint is not a solid color. Paint is ever so slightly opaque, depending on how well you water it. I'm not going to do a demonstration because there are better examples out there on YouTube of anything I could come up with. Oh yeah, I missed that whole back of the spike. Yeah, good thing I came back to do this guy. Oof. And yes, don't worry, we will be coming back for the leather straps at a later date. How's the shoulder pad? Yeah, the shoulder pad looks fine. That's one. What mini is it? These are the skeletons from Cursed City. So these are the skeletons. So it's a 10 set. So there's, I think, 6 with spears, 2 with swords, and then there's a banner bearer, which is that one, and then there's also the unit champion, which is that guy with another sword. Yeah, the old school chaos. Speaking of old school chaos, hang on, he's unpainted, but let me grab him. The old school Horn Lord on foot. I'm going to be painting him up for a Warcry warband. But nice. So I'm if you've got a Chaos Army, I'm obligated to ask which are the big four? Undivided, or have you got a particular god you follow? I tend towards being a bit of a corn man myself. But I'm willing to tolerate Nurgle. that back on. Mirror. Get more coverage on these. But yes, welcome in. This is our second session painting the skeletons. We did another session last Sunday, I think. Ooh, 60 demons. Oh man, you're committed. 60 demons, man. But a nice big 40 block of warriors. Yeah, I can appreciate that. Chaos, I remember Chaos Warriors were some of the hardest hitting. If you could get them into combat, they hit like an absolute truck. Yep. Yep, the old Lord of Change and the Dragon Ogres. I don't know, I could never quite get into Dragon Ogres. They were always one of those things that was a little bit like, I don't know, they never quite sat right for me. And I have a strong suspicion, so like back in the day, and it's funny because people actually complain about this now, but when they were sculpting models, often what they'd do at Games Workshop back when they were hand sculpting things is they would they'd sculpt, like say they were sculpting 20 miniatures, right? They'd sculpt 10, make the molds for them, then they'd take those original 10 and chop them up and switch bits around. So you'd wind up with, like, you know, a certain torso with a different head on it and things like that. So they'd all look similar, but a bit different. And they did it to save time because, you know, making miniatures was time consuming when you're sculpting it in hand. People get mad about it now because they do the same thing digitally. Everyone's like, oh, that's lazy. And I'm like, no, it's the same thing they've always done. But I strongly suspect that Dragon Ogres were the same thing. It was they were like, we need a new monster. Well, we got these ogres. Just cut them in half and stick a new body on the bottom. It's I've got a mixture of things, but for old Warhammer Fantasy, for me I was always a lizard man guy. A lizard man, should you say? I was always a big fan of my Servants of the Old Ones. One of the few units, Saurus Warriors, that I was confident could go toe-to-toe with Chaos Warriors and hold their own. Whoop. I'm knocking things over. Wait, which ones have I done? Okay, no, I've done this one. Done that one. Alright, just did that guy. Excellent. I'm trying to remember where I put all my things. And I am looking forward. So 2024, the old world coming back. A lot of people are really hesitant about it. I'm not. I know it's going to be a little bit sludge. But I'm willing to wait. Like, when you think about it, the Horus Heresy game came out, like, 10 years ago. And it was, yeah, again, a bit janky, and it wasn't until we got second edition last year that things kind of got squared away. So I'm just glad that Old World's coming back. That it's, you know, even if it's going to be janky, I'm sure it will be. And I'm also glad that the original armies they're all getting support. Even if they won't be part of the main factions, they did at least announce that, like, hey, you'll be able to play your old armies. So think at some point my lizardmen will be hitting the table again. At least as lizardmen, as opposed to Seraphon. I never rebased mine. I kept them on square bases. Fuck them. Tidied up. Now we'll see. So I think a lot of people have been upset that you know, their particular army won't be part of the core game. You know, I've seen some Skaven players being like, "Oh, come on, no Skaven." But I think that's fine, because I think, again, much like the Horus Heresy, there'll be room for it later. You know, when Horus Heresy dropped, we didn't at first have things like Solar Auxilia. You know, we didn't have Mechanicum. We didn't have Demons of the Runestorm, which they just added into the game, so... Let's get this guy's breastplate done. We'll say, I think Age of Sigmar is a strange game. It can be very enjoyable. I really like the game, and I'm glad that it's gotten to a place where it is, you know, it's standing on its own 2 feet. It's a good game to play. But I feel like there are so many opportunities that they kind of let fall by the wayside with that game. Like, I didn't have Deepkin, such a cool faction. But they really haven't gotten a whole lot of screen time. They show up every now and again, but it's like, hey, you've come up with a relatively original take on, like, undersea murder elves. You know, give them a bit more center stage. Need to put a little bit more on my palette. But I'm tentatively hopeful. They just announced yesterday the rumor engine image for this week, the teaser of what's to come. And it looks distinctly spiky and distinctly elvish. Now I suspect it's probably going to be a Daughters of Cain thing. But I'm holding out hope. I'm holding out hope that sometime soon we're going to get Umbraneth. We're going to get servants of Malarian, the Dark Elves of Age of Sigmar. Well, Shadow Elves, but... Because I think I run a lot of the elf units from Cities of Sigmar. And I think they're quite good, and I think the new army book, which drops on Saturday, they'll be fine. But they've been very clear with this new army book that dwarves and the elves are not the stars of the show. The prime billing is going to the humans. And I think that's fine. I get what they're doing. Like, they're trying to phase out the older models. But at the same time, it does feel like a little bit of a letdown. Because they're, like, for instance, one of the new Cities of Sigmar cities, their whole thing is that they improve Cavaliers. They make your Free Guild Cavaliers better. They give them bonuses on the charge. Now, Free Guild Cavaliers and Drakespawn Knights, of which I have a bunch, are basically identical. There's some ever so slight differences between them, but they're very, very similar. However, if I run this city, my Drakespawn Knights won't get any benefit from it. It's only specifically Free Guild Cavaliers. You know, and they very easily could have made this a Free Guild Cavaliers or Drakespawn Knights get this bonus, but no, they were like, no, just Free Guild Cavaliers. So again, they'll still be fine. You can run them. It's just the level of complexity and versatility is not there. I will, however, be doing a silly as soon as the book drops and as soon as other things are in stock. I've decided I'm going to do a silly investment and I'm going to buy a bunch of steam tanks. I'm going to do an 8 steam tank, 2,000 point army, Greywater fastness. It will not be a good list. The steam tanks are not monsters, which means they don't count as 5 models on a objective. It'll be fucking hilarious. And that's what matters after all, the memes. But if I can get my hands on 8 steam tanks, that's probably what I'm gonna build on stream. I'm gonna do an 8 steam tank building stream. It'll probably drive me insane, but I suspect they will not go together as easy as I want them to. That is one thing that's a little bit disappointing with the new Cities of Sigmar book. So the Hellstorm rocket battery's gone. We're pretty sure it's going, and the Hellstorm rocket battery and the Hellblaster volley gun. Pretty sure they're going back to the old world. But it basically means that, like, there's only one, I think, yeah, the steam tank is like the only Ironworld Arsenal artillery unit in the book anymore. The Great Cannon also might be the new cannon kit. But it means there's basically like 2 artillery units in the book. And the dispossessed cogsmith, he only buffs gyrocopters and gyrobombers now, so he's a bit useless. It's a funny space where there's not good synergy for the war machines, which I think is a little bit sad. So that's always been the great tragedy of Cities of Sigmar. They were a book of necessity. But it meant that they very much had issues with internal synergy. Their units do not often work together well. You can build good lists. Hell, they were really dominant at the start of start of third. The Yndrasta and then a bunch of Fire Drakes lists. Oof. Alright. I think we're back to dry brushing. Yeah, that's good enough. Yes, that's the rep ram. Just dries a little bit different. Sometimes I have to do a double take. I'm like, wait a minute. Is that the paint I meant to put down on my palette? That can be the problem with wet palettes sometimes. It keeps all your paint fresh, which is great. But there are times where I'm like, hang on a minute. Which puddle of paint was I meant to dip my brush into this time? Especially when I'm doing highlights, nothing makes me panic more, where I'm just like, oh crap. Did I just get the right color to highlight with? A little bit of brown on his teeth, that's okay. That was clearly a smoker. With that nicotine teeth. Build up a little bit more on that shoulder pad. Please, Mr. Towel, stay still. He's all rusted up. You know the great tragedy of skeletons? They would not be able to play the saxophone. There's no lips or cheeks. That's the one great tragedy of the Skeleton War. So that we know that there'll be only percussion instruments, probably the xylophone. There'll be and maybe some stringed instruments, but there will be no saxophone. There'll be no flute, no clarinet, no oboe. These scimitars always perpetually worry me. They always flex when I'm painting them. I'm just like, don't break. Don't break, you bastard. Don't break. They do come up great. A little bit more. That's looking really nice. Hang on, let me try and zoom in on that one. Okay. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay, put that guy aside for a minute. Load up our palette again. Now you'll notice as I'm going with the dry brush a bit, it's starting to splay out a little bit. That's fine. Actually beneficial. You just got to keep an eye on it just to make sure that it's not getting too much paint in it, because that can be a sign that paint's getting in it and drying. You just have to be careful that you're not destroying your brush. And if it does get like that, don't worry, it can be fixed. And if you do wind up destroying it beyond repair, don't panic too much. These things happen, but also you can still find a use for them. So I use some of my more destroyed brushes for basing. So the bases on these guys is Vallejo texture, and I use that just with an old dead brush just to spread it around. There's some texture. I anticipate these guys are going to be probably like 60% dry brushing, to be honest. Hit that shield. Rim. That's it. I really should have gotten out my I keep saying this every stream. I should really get out my Sepulchral Guard, the other unit of skeletons that I painted, so you can kind of get an impression of what the final appearance will be roughly. The main difference here is I've done more of a black for the cloth as opposed to a red. shield. There we go. Also, I do like painting skeletons much more than zombies. I have some zombies to paint and I kind of don't want to. I find zombies are less appealing and, like, you can't just dry brush them and get that nice look. You gotta do more with them. I'm not a huge fan. Especially the newer GW zombies where they've kind of done the whole, like, plants growing through them thing. I get it looks kind of cool. It's like a, you know, distinct look. I do like how they've got the stakes driven through them. I thought that was cool. I love the idea of, like, places in Shyish where, like, zombies are probably pretty frequent. Whenever they bury a body, they just put a stake through it to kind of, like, maybe not stop it from turning into a zombie, but at the very least inconvenience it. Like, imagine if you were a zombie, you know, you get resurrected to do the bidding of some evil necromancer, but, you know, you've basically been pinned into the ground, so you've got to haul a stake out of yourself before you actually go off and do nefarious things. I've talked about this before, but I honestly think that fantasy, like a medieval fantasy setting, is the peak for doing zombie fiction. I feel like modern zombie fiction's kind of a bit meh. And yes, that includes The Last of Us. I don't care if people say, oh, but this game's so good or the show's so good. No, fungus zombies are not as creative as people say they are. Using cordyceps fungus to create zombies for the game was not a smart idea. It was a cop-out. But back to my point, I reckon fantasy, or just a medieval setting, is the prime setup for doing zombies. Why? Well, because zombies, when you've got guns and cars and stuff, are less scary. You can get away from them. Guns are relatively effective in the sense that they kill things effectively from a range with relatively little difficulty. You know, it doesn't take a lot of training or stamina to use a gun. It takes training to use it well, but the basics, you know, are not hard. Whereas in a medieval setting, it's like, what are your options for killing a zombie? Well, you can shoot it with a bow and arrow, or like, you know, a crossbow or a sling or something like that. But hitting it in the head, sufficient to kill it, well, that's going to be hard. Particularly if you're not skilled. So your other option is you got to get close to kill it. Which is kind of, you know, problem. Again, like knights in armor, sure, they can do it, but at the same time, and that's great, because that's what armor's for. Armor is to protect you. So knights getting in close and killing zombies, not that bad of an idea, but at the same time, if there are too many zombies, well then, as a knight, you can just get dragged down and killed. You know, it's the same with horses, right? You know, escaping from zombies on a horse is a great idea until you realize that a horse is made out of meat, and the zombies are just going to eat your horse out from under you. Oh, that's a bit too heavy. Oh well, too bad, so sad. The other reason is in modern, like, zombie stuff, right? They always need an explanation for why, you know, why they're zombies. Oh, it's a virus. Oh, it's a pandemic. Oh, it's a parasite. It's, you know, the T-virus or whatever from developed as a bioweapon. It's a fungus. In a fantasy setting, you don't need that. Just, okay, well, why are there zombies? Necromancer. Evil wizard. Right? So if you want the main character's best friend who's just been killed to come back from the dead and now, you know, do battle with him, cool, great. Evil wizard. Evil Wizard does it. You don't need to, you know, you don't need to explain why. You know, why do you need to kill him, like stab him in the head to kill him? Evil Wizard. How the magic works. What's the line from The Simpsons? If you ever notice something like that, a wizard did it. And these guys looking rusty as hell. This is still only our first layer of dry brushing. We got like 3 more to go. This is the trick to rust, is layers. Rust has layers. Augers have layers. Which actually, rust is actually a pretty good technique to use on ogres as well. Rusty, rusty, rusty. Man, this is the phase of painting I really love. As I was saying earlier, I really encourage people to get into painting, but also just be patient with it. Because your base coats are going to look kind of meh. Once you start getting some layers onto it, you'll start getting some depth, and that's when the models really start becoming interesting. Because painting is about creating the illusion of shape. It's about making something small look like something big. So once you start getting that illusion building up, your model will start looking much more impressive to yourself, and you will feel much happier about what you have painted so far. That needs more paint. Oh, spine. I do need to get a better painting setup. I am shrimping just a bit. That'll do. Okay, shield time. Yeah, I think that was a little bit. I think I had a little bit of an overload on one side of my brush there. That's okay. I think that's an attitude I think people need to take a bit more, is the Bob Ross attitude. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. Because unless you're trying to paint for like Golden Demon or some shit, you probably, you know, any mistakes you make probably either won't be noticed or are easily fixed. And like that's the thing, like with these guys, I've painted the inside of the skirt a little bit, but like the inside of the, like all in here, all in there, I haven't really painted at all. I've kind of put a bit of color in so you can see it from certain angles, but for a lot of it I've just said, you know what, screw it. You're never going to see it, doesn't need it. Alright, nice. Just gonna give my brush a rinse. Swap out another one. I kind of need another model holder. I only have 4. Which means I can only ever really have 4 models queued up at a time, which is a bit of a pain if I have a unit of 10. Works fine in anything divisible by 4s. Anything divisible by 10s or 3s, not quite as much. these guys off. We might also do these. I got some treasure chests over here I wanted to finish off as well. Might hit them with a little bit of a dry brush as well. I might do them a little bit differently. Might hit them with the Gawthor brown instead, maybe. No, actually, you know what? I think I will stick with whatever else I've got. What am I currently doing? Is it Bestigor? I'll need to check. Oh, Doomball. That's it. I knew it was a Beastman name. Alright. Let's swap out some of our painting handles. Alright, y'all can have a look at the skeletons while I just switcheroonie around. So as you can see, they've got a lot more red in them now. It's soon going to be a lot more orange too. So I'm going to dull that red down a little bit with some Agrax Earthshade. That wonderful, miraculous substance. Now it's funny, so Games Workshop recently changed the formula of their washes. Apparently they're thinner now. I haven't tried the new ones. I have some of them, but I don't have the new Agrax. And I've heard some people say it's different. Some people said it's better. Some people said it's worse. But I kind of want to try out the washes from Two Thin Coats, because I've heard they're similar to old Agrax. I also have some of the washes from... Have I got them in the drawer here? No, I don't. They're next door. But so Darkstar, this brand, they released a set of washes recently. I think there's, off the top of my head, 4 or 5. It's a black, a sepia, a brown, and then I think another brown. But yeah, I've been meaning to give those a try as well at some point. It's just, it's hard, particularly with washes. It's very hard to get started with them when you don't really know what their formulation's like. I just need a suitable test model, that's all. Get it brown. The same with, was it War Colors? I've been very tempted to try their paints, but I've heard incredibly mixed reviews. I've heard some people say that they're the best paints you'll ever get. I've heard other people say that they're terrible. Ah, Luna, welcome in. Welcome in. You're in time for skeleton painting. Ah, that's right, I missed part of this guy's rib cage, but that's okay. We can sort that out later. I'll just switch our camera around real quick. That's a little bit too heavy. Unload that a little bit. This guy's kind of weird because he's got a full, unlike the other ones who just have an Aventail, this guy's got like a full coif. He's also got a mask that I want to leave unpainted for now because I was going to paint that in like a gold or something. I'm going to need to come back for those ribs later. Yeah, that's... I've overloaded this a bit, but that's not a problem. Yeah, okay, I've overloaded it, but it's not actually looking too bad. He's just looking especially rusty. And again, we'll recapture that divot when we hit these guys with a wash. That's not a problem. Feeling like somehow I've lost my balance on my brush here. Yeah, okay, that's looking good. So yeah, I mentioned this before, I test on my finger a little bit. I find it's the most reliable way of seeing if the brush has got a correct amount of paint on it. Let's get the shield front. That's looking much better. That's looking much better. Too bad it's on the back of the model that no one ever looks at. The vambrace done. The sword. I do like the swords on these guys. They're kind of scimitarish, kind of close to a Polish saber as well. There we go. Get his shoes done. Get them kicks looking nice. Oh, that had me very worried. I caught the sword then. You might have heard it on the microphone. I don't think so. I caught the sword and tipped my finger. And I was very worried I was going to break that then. Which is something interesting. This is something that they do a lot more with the newer models. Is they have parts of the model that exist outside the confines of the base. So let me just get this shield. I'll give you an explanation. So with a lot of the older models, let me just clean my brush. Everything had to stay within inside a certain perimeter. Because for Warhammer Fantasy, everything was on square bases, and everything had to be able to stand next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. They had to be able to rank up. So, for example, well, most of them had to be able to rank up. So, for example, this Dark Elf Dreadlord with Great Weapon, notice how, compared to this skeleton, so with the skeleton, he's got a bunch of stuff hanging out from outside his base. He's got a bunch of cloak that hangs out all the way out here, a bunch of shield, and then his sword sticks out well beyond the perimeter of his base. Whereas the Dreadlord, everything vertically is in line with his base. So there's nothing either side. If I run my finger up and down, nothing runs into my finger. Tail a little bit, but it's not really that much of a problem. Same with the back. If you look at the back, his cloak doesn't leave the edge of the base. And that was so that you could, again, have everyone in tight, shoulder to shoulder, and not collide. And actually, if I could be bothered to go and open my box and get my Corsairs out, you'd see that that's how they work. If I put them all next to each other, they can group up really tight because none of them have big dynamic poses or anything. Now here's a question. What did I do with my it's over here. Ando having a seniors moment and forgetting what he's done with his dry brush. that's done. Let's do our banner bearer. As I mentioned before, I did a bit of work on these guys off stream. I did the bones and such, and also on this guy I painted the banner. So he's now got a red banner, which I think will stick out nice with the unit. Gives us a nice little spot of contrast. I don't know if I'm going to do any detailing on it, do any symbols or anything, or just leave it red. So I think just having a scrap of red cloth kind of fits. Especially considering these guys are in thrall to a vampire, so... And truth be told, historically most, and I mean, yes, I understand it's a fantasy setting, but fantasy based in reality adds a level of verisimilitude. Yeah, historically most flags are actually not that complicated. For example, the Flag of Denmark. Flag of Denmark is actually one of the oldest flags in the world. Well, one of the oldest continually used flags in the world. It's literally just a white cross on a red field. It's simple and easy to make. So, same goes for a lot of these sorts of guys. They probably just have a red flag or maybe a red flag with some quartering on it or something, or a very simple shape. A lot of the Islamic dynasties had very simple flags, often with a, you know, flag with a crescent moon on it or something like that. Sometimes maybe with some Arabic script. Get that. I got a bit of red on his helmet spike, but that's fine. Trust the process, it will clean it up. There we go, brushy brushy. That's what I should have called this stream, just brushy brushy. That banner is wobbling a little bit, which makes me concerned. Stabilize it a little bit while I dry brush it. It's looking better. Let's get that shoulder pad. Managing to get everything but the shoulder pad. Great job, Ando. Yeah, this guy's got a lot of overbrush on him. Okay, an extreme amount of overbrush on him. He's gonna need some tidying. Yeah, this guy's gonna need a lot of tidying. We're the one with the most conflicting shapes. Yeah, that needs a little bit more. Then I need to sit up straight because I'm shrimping. I'm shrimping. No, I've taken this guy away from the camera, but I just need to get up close to him. Yeah, there we go. All right. Next up, we might just do these treasure chests that I mentioned earlier.
And attention all personnel, this is the NTD conducting the launch status check. Verify ready to resume count and go for launch.
On behalf of KSC launch teams, past and present, we salute the entire astronaut corps for their dedication. Have an excellent mission and Godspeed.
These are our little treasure chests. These came as part of the Dungeons and Lasers expansion stuff. They look black. They're actually not. They're the same color. These guys were base coated. Rhinox hide. Just I've washed it with Agrax Earthshade. You can see a little bit of detail on them, so we're gonna hit them with a quick dry brush. Hopefully pop some of that detail a bit more, some of that wood grain. This is looking good. So hopefully these don't come off. I've just got them blue tacked in place. Oh no, that is too thin. That's too thin. There's too much water in that brush. Let's try that now. Yeah, this is still too damp. Too dank. See how that goes. Let's try this on the side panel. That's looking more like it. There we go. Just keep doing some laps back and forth. Get out the wood grain. I'll be going back over the Iron Warriors to the iron banding to tidy it up a bit. That's already starting to give us some great depth. If I wanted to keep this really dark, I could have just gone back with Rhinox hide.
There have been many fabulous missions throughout the years, not only for our expanded knowledge of the universe, but for the improvements you have contributed to on Earth. Have an excellent mission and Godspeed.
Yeah, one of the tricks with doing like things like wood grain is to always paint perpendicular to the grain. Because if you paint parallel to it, it'll get in the trenches and it'll just fill it up. Whereas, and we're getting a little bit of that, but not too much. Whereas if you paint perpendicular, it'll just skip across those high points and you'll get that nice wood grain effect. So unfortunately I don't really have anything to hold these, so I've kind of blue tacked them onto my large miniature holder. Actually, this is one of the things that frustrates me a little bit about the miniature holders, right? So this is the OG type, the older type that GW have. These are the newer ones. And the newer ones are a single piece. And actually, I more or less like the shape of these better. But they're a single piece, which is kind of annoying. The old school ones, the head actually demounts. Actually learned this from the painting phase. Peachy's podcast. But yeah, these actually demount. And they're on a 3mm screw. So I can mount this like my other camera that I've got over there. I could mount this to that mounting. It's a 3mm thread. So it's a standard for like camera gear and stuff like that. So you can mount these on tripods or holders or whatever else you want to do with them. But the thing that annoys me is these things will hold up to about 30mm base model. These will hold probably from about a 60mm base. But something like my Knight Questoris, So this guy here, he's on a 40 mil base. I'm just trying to make sure I don't get paint on him from having rub paint off. He fits neatly in the middle, but will not lock. None of the he'll rattle around in there. None of the jaws will actually lock onto his base. So the annoying things with the GW paint holders is they'll do anything up to like 32s, and they'll do anything from like 50. And these will actually, so I put a cavalry base right here. These will do cavalry bases as well. So these can hold a cav base. So hang on. So as you can see, cavalry base. So anything on a horse, locked in perfectly fine. Great. But you know, things like Terminators, you know, bigger models, they will not go in this. Any, like, again, larger stuff, like, have I got anything bigger on my shelf? Yeah, sure I do. Let's grab Black Wheel. So this is not a Warhammer miniature. This is Black Wheel from Bot War. It's an Australian-made game. So here he is, unpainted. He will fit in perfectly because he's on a 60 mil base. It's just anything in that narrow range of 40 mil, which is actually surprisingly common for GW stuff. Well, it's not surprising, but it's kind of their, you know, what used to be heavy infantry will probably now be called medium infantry category. So yeah, bit annoying. Rant over. He says with cute Japanese weeaboo singing in the background. I don't like the way Games Workshop have done this. Now listen to my waifu thing. Alright. It's a little bit heavy. That looks better. I think it's going to get a little bit funky because the sculpting on top of these chests is a little bit not as deep. Shallower, that's the word. Yeah, it's a little bit shallower than on the front facings. I think that's just a result of the molding. You know, a two-part mold. Yeah, now this is more appropriate for me ranting. Angry hood music. Yeah, that looks nicer. Grab a little bit more paint. Yep, side of the brush. Almost caught me. There we go. And I need to come back and tidy up those hinges. Some of the other iron banding, but that's fine. Actually, a little bit of brown on it's not bad. It makes it look rusty. I do want these to kind of look old anyway. That one's looking good. So like again, compare them next to each other. The one on the left looks practically black, just with the wash, and now that we've added some highlights to it, some dry brushing, it's looking much more like an actual wooden chest. And also, again, these darker areas on the edges, we get that illusion of depth, that illusion of shadow, which makes it look like a much more substantial object. What I was talking about earlier about miniature painting is often making something small appear big. You know, it's often not necessarily about just looking at something going, oh, how does that look in real life? It's about saying, okay, how does that look in real life, and how do I make something 1/100th the size look the same? That's why I'm kind of iffy on some of the miniature basing stuff where like people do plants and they make these really realistic looking plants that they stick on their bases, and I'm like, okay, but do my models look like they match that? Do they look realistic? I think that's more a limitation of me rather than other people. Oh yeah, trick when you're dry brushing wood grain. As I was saying earlier, paint perpendicular to the grain, but also paint in like very deliberate motions, right? So like sometimes if you stay too close and keep going like that, what you wind up doing is you don't actually lift your brush from contact, and you wind up smearing paint sideways into the grain. Whereas if you do very deliberate like brush and lift, it means that you don't get as much into the grain. Which means again you can preserve that shading that we're after. They call him Paint Finger. Man with a lust for paint. Yeah, areas like this get a bit tricky, because areas that are a bit flat, areas that don't have texture, don't like dry brushing. So things like Eldar and Space Marines don't tend to take well to dry brushing, because they've just got big flat areas. There's no texture to actually grab the paint. Another one as well, and I'm not going to do this because my dry brushing is looking fine at the moment, but if you dry brush something that's looking a little bit too bright, or a little bit too chalky, my recommendation is don't wash it. Washes are fine. Again, well, it depends. If you haven't done a wash already, you can do that, but my recommend is actually do a glaze. So not as liquid as a wash, thin it down, and again, try and catch those high points and darken those down a little bit, or rather just blend them in. Yes, it's about blending that in as opposed to darkening it down too much, because I find sometimes if you do a wash, it'll darken everything down a little bit too much and it takes you back to square one. Yeah, there we go. Those are looking nice. See, the wood grain's popping. Get a little bit more on the back of this one. Yeah, there we go. It's okay to have these be a little bit uneven, because wood is uneven. Particularly like lacquered wood. You get dark spots. You get wear and tear. What I actually might do is a bit of a later highlight, a light dry brush of Gawthor, just to represent areas where it's worn a bit, been buffed by being carried around. Actually, have I got it in the drawer? Let's see. I think we might give these chests another dry brush on the metal. If I have it. Is it in my drawer? What's in my drawer of secrets? No, that's Ironbreaker. Could do with a shake. Iron Shaker. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Nope. I think it's my room next door. So, do I want to go get it? The answer is not right now. But no, I was going to grab Necron Compound, which is the dry brush version of Ironbreaker. As I talked about earlier, I really like the dry paints from Citadel. Very handy. Thought I had one sitting in this drawer. Thought I had, no, it's pretty khaki. Thought I had some dries sitting in this drawer, but oh well. I'm wrong. Alright, in which case. Yeah, these can come off. Oh. Take these off for now. Chuck them over with the skeletons. Get that blue tack off. Ugh. I really need to invest in museum putty. It's a better alternative than blue tack. I'm just lazy. Here's a question. Do you ever do something stupid when you were a kid? I mean, everyone did. Kids are not particularly intelligent, but you ever do that thing where you think you've come up with like a way to hack the system, you've come up with a cheaper way to do something? Because I remember, it wasn't quite me. Maybe I was just in hindsight, but I believe I was skeptical at the time. But I remember a friend of mine back in the day. So it's common hobby putty that's used for filling gaps and things called green stuff. It's a 2-part epoxy putty. It's, you know, a yellow bit and a green bit. Sorry, well, yellow and blue go together to become green. That makes it active. It's malleable. It's like blue tack. You can shape it and whatever, but it'll dry solid and you can sculpt it. So it's often used for filling gaps or for like sculpting new things if you want to. Back in the day, Games Workshop, all their models were hand sculpted in green stuff. But you know, back when you're a kid, green stuff costs money. And when you've got pocket money, you're like, oh, I don't want to buy green stuff, I want to buy other stuff. And so I remember a friend of mine used to be like, no, you don't need green stuff. What you do is you mix blue tack with super glue and it's the same thing. Yeah, it's not really the same thing. But, I don't know, it created a suitable enough mess. I'm sure anyone who has actually had experience sculpting would be cringing right now. Ugh. Why would you subject yourself to that? Yeah, okay, I think... Tossing up, what do I want to hit these models with next? Let me consult the drawer again. I've got Gawthor, but I'm worried that Gawthor is going to be too light. Yeah, you know what? Screw it. We'll go Gorthor. We'll go Gorthor, and then we'll be heading up to... Well, we'll give Gorthor a crack, and then we'll be heading up to Scrag. Scrag actually goes on very orangey, so it's not too much of an issue. Well, we've got him mounted, so we may as well do the Champion. Just do it in reverse order. Alright, Swordsman. And Spearman. I don't know if the spear or sword actually has any difference in playing Cursed City. Believe it or not, I haven't actually played the game. It came out during COVID. I've never had a chance to actually sit down and play it with friends. There are many board games that I have acquired on the principle of, well, one day, Endo, one day you'll get your life together and have a weekly games night with friends. Spoilers, Ando does not. Okay, while we're just checking our panel, let's do a quick cycle over so we can have a look at those treasure chests. Let's get those on camera. Let's look at our treasure chests, looking nice. We got our Knight Quester, spin him around. Get a better look at the shiny boy. He looks really shiny on camera. He's not that, I don't actually know he's that shiny in real life, but the camera really accentuates the highlights. Alright, let's cycle back. Probably set up the cameras on a timer so they just alternate between each other. Ooh, that's a lot of... Really loaded up my brush there, huh? That is good. I'm a little bit worried it'll be a bit too grey, but we'll see. Start as always with the shield. Now with this, I tend to start putting it on a little bit more unevenly. You know, I stipple it more than I dry brush it. Yeah, there we are. That's taken out the red a little bit. It's okay. Maybe I should have probably started with this actually, but oh well. Again, it's all about the layers. I'm trying to get that randomness. Yeah, it's not too bad. Those of you worrying about the high points, about, hey, what's the actual highlight on this eventually going to be? Well, it'll be two things. It'll be orange, but also I tend to hit the extreme high points with a little bit of Necron compound. Because I find that helps bring back the impression that it's metallic. It gives that little metallic glint on the edges. But also, particularly on swords, I like to give the impression that even though they're rusty, they're still sharp. Now you can just do an edge highlight with orange to kind of draw attention to the edge. Again, I like to go with the silver instead. Because again, I like the implication that, like, even though they're skeletons, their blades are still sharp. They've still been sharpened. They've, you know, kind of scraped the rust off the edge. sufficient for it to be, lethal. Yeah, this is taking a lot of that red out, so we might go with a second hit of what's it called? Doom Ball. That's fine. I don't mind that it's kind of softening it a bit. Again, the key to this stuff's always layers. As I said, more this bit's a bit more stippling than it is dry brushing, but whoop, I forgot he has a scabbard. Ooh. Ah, that's right. His elbow's not attached. That's why it flexes so much. Again, this guy gives me the fear every time. Alright, the champion. Let's get a little bit more. And what more do you need? Synthwave and skeletons. See, now I'm in hindsight, I'm like, I should have painted these guys up synthwave. I should have painted them up blue with, like, dark blue with neon blue highlights. Pink and orange fade on the weapons. I've done it before. Well, sort of. These are my Escher gangers. Let me grab them. These are my Escher gangers that I started and never finished, and I don't know if I ever will. I don't know, the campaign kind of fell over, but these guys were going to be synthwave colors. All their weapons were going to be bright chrome. It's my gang name. They were the Chrome Razors. And I love Necromunda. It's a really fun game when I get the rare chance to play it. And the new book's coming out as well. Well, it's just come out. Giving us more squats. Yeah! And I'm curious where they're... Whoop, that's a little bit too much. Curious where they're taking the story after the whole Aranthian succession thing. I was a little bit worried about it when they kind of announced some of the plot points. I was, reading them in the books, and I was like, where are you going with this? Because, I don't want to spoil anything, but I doubt that the Imperium is going to allow, shall we say it, a giant mechanical-bodied Psyker to, rule over Necromunda. I understand the Imperium's intentions are elsewhere at the moment, with the opening of the Great Rift. It's one of those things where it seemed a little bit too spectacular, even by Necromunda's standards. But of course, waiting in the wings to restore the balance is, of course, old mate Cal Jericho. #1 bounty hunter on all of Necromunda. what I keep saying. So like this Warhammer thing that they're doing with Amazon, the TV show, I'm pretty sure it's going to be whatchamacallit, tip of my tongue, Eisenhorn, because I mean that was announced ages ago and we've heard nothing from it, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be Eisenhorn. But, and I mean Eisenhorn's not a bad pick, but I still think one of the better options for introduction to Warhammer, or at least the universe, would be Cal Jericho. Because Necromunda's a nice restricted setting, so, you know, you don't have to introduce too much of the crazy stuff like Space Marines and everything. And Cal's kind of a lovable scumbag. I always describe him as Han Solo. Han Solo if Han Solo never came back at the end of A New Hope. If he just took the money and left. Yeah, again, apply a little bit more Doom Ball. Put a bit more of that oxide in. Ox, Doom Ball. Unintentional puns. Cool. It's a little too streaky. There we go. The streak's off. Excellent. Okay, there we go. I realize that you can't see this right now, but that's okay. Trust me, it looks real good. I'm just gonna be able to look at him where I can see him. Not quite on the camera. Yeah, as you can see, that's put all of the oxide back on. He's looking very rusty now. So now we'll be to our next step. So I'm going to get these guys oxided up a bit again. Then we're going to hit them with a wash. I want to reinstall a bit of the depth. Side hip plate that I'd missed. There we go. Stipple that on. Yeah, we'll do a wash and then we'll be coming back in with Scrag Brown later. Scrag has a very orangey finish to it, so it'll be our first stage of rust. Well, our first stage of orange rust. Can't exactly do a stream entirely about rust and then be like, oh, it's the first stage of rust next time. That's looking good. Which one was it? This one. Let's get the Aventail done. Back at the shield. It's interesting because these guys' shields are textured very much as if they're a solid piece of metal. If you look at the shields on the Sepulchral Guard, they actually have wood backings. Most of them do, at least. One of them doesn't. Yeah, let's get that. Cauldron. Actually, it's not Cauldron, it's a Vambrace. Come on, Ando. You know your armor better than this. That guy's looking nice and rusty. I might not wash this guy. He needs more cleaning up because of all the overbrushing that I've done. I might put him aside. Some special treatment. Yeah, okay. You will go aside for a moment, sir. I'm gonna wash my brush out. Whoop. Alright, gonna wash my brush out. I'm gonna take a quick second. Realize my connection is absolutely tanked.
I just feel like I've been stuck here my whole life. There must be something else out there, waiting, you know? Just for us. We could run
Well,
away,
hopefully that hasn't absolutely tanked my stream.
just leave. Never look back.
Okay, no, apparently it's doing much healthier. Well, still only at 1,000 kilobytes. Why the fuck is that happening?
I'll come with you.
Ah, that explains why. Well, if the stream quality has been absolutely garbage, it's because Cyberpunk decided it wanted to download while I was streaming.
Close the door, waiting for the flash. Greyhound station,
Fantastic.
eating cash. It's Lazarus. We come
Oh yeah, my bitrate's basically doubled. Jesus.
say it's dark.
Australian internet, folks. Australian internet.
We've been in this town for far too long. They say it's
Should have noticed that earlier. Which brush did I want? No, that's my detail one. I think this was the one I wanted, I think. Yes. Alright, washing time. Pyrex Earthshade. That magical substance. So this should add a bit of depth, tie our browns together a bit. So how did I get more brown on my fingers? Unless, it's on the side of the bottle. Okay. Bloody GW paint bottles. I don't hate them as much as a lot of people do. A lot of people hate the whole flip top thing. They love droppers. I think droppers are actually overrated. they're fine, but they're overrated. That's a little bit too much, but we can cut that back. Let's get a little bit into this chest plate. To the scale mail. Some people say that they don't like washes because they make the model come, like, sometimes the finish can become glossy. My response to that is don't worry. Because if you seal your model with a matte varnish, that will kill that gloss 100%. That's why actually, for armor, I'll often go back and I'll seal the model with a matte varnish. But for armor, I'll often come back and hit it with a gloss top coat, because I feel like that gives armor a lot of its luster back. So for instance, again, my Sepulchral Guard, which I mentioned, I came back and gave the Warden a gloss coat on his breastplate, so I wanted it to look a little bit more in better condition than the rest of his minions. And it gave it a very nice aged metal patina. That gave it kind of that gloss, that reflective gloss. Games Workshop used to make gloss washes. They discontinued them recently when they updated the wash line, which I think was a bit of a disappointment. There are some other places that make gloss washes, though. They're a bit tricky, I find, because sometimes, particularly my Darkstar Metallics, they don't like a gloss wash. If you put a gloss wash down, they look great, but then when you try and put another layer on top, it doesn't seem to be able to grip onto the glossy finish. Oh, that's a little bit heavy, but that's okay. You can see this is coming on really nicely now with the wash. It's really tying a lot of that brown together. Gonna make those highlights pop. Which is, yes, I know it's similar to what all the people are rambling about on YouTube about, what do they call it, slap chop or whatever? Yeah, similar principle to that, but we're just doing it for the rust as opposed to the whole miniature. Yeah, that guy's looking good. Whoop. That moment of fear when your thumb kind of sticks to the Agrax Earthshade and you're just like, oh god, don't tip over. Don't spill the precious Agrax. I think everyone has either experienced the fear or the reality of spilling a bottle of shade. I remember I spilled an almost full bottle of Nuln Oil. Oof, that hurt. Even worse if you have carpet. A bit more. Bit too heavy on the edge there, so I'll cut that back in a second. It really is interesting. Wash paints really have changed how people paint. It's one of the few things that I think, like, really, like, changed the methodology. Because people have kind of gone back recently to a lot of the older ways of using inks. Inks are still great, but I just remember back in the day when, like, that was all anyone had. It was just using inks for glazing. And it was real pain because, like, if you'd figured it out, you'd figured it out. But for someone like me who was, you know, pretty young, ink was still kind of this question mark of, like, how the hell do I use this? I was always a big user of the wipe back technique, which is, it works, but it's wasteful. You brush ink onto a thing and then you use a paper towel or a sponge or something to wipe it off. And it'll stain. So it's good for metallics, because it'll stain the metal, and it should stain most of the recesses. But it's wasteful in that you're putting a bunch of ink on and then taking a bunch of ink off. So it's like, well, look at all this ink I'm wasting. And as I said before, given how much paint costs, I don't like being wasteful. Man, I fucking love Max Cruz. Just give me sexy saxophone for everything. Like, give me more movies and TV shows with just a sexy saxophone soundtrack. Yeah, that's got some really good depth to it now with the brown in there. Get a bit more on that shoulder pad. Bit heavy, but I really wanted to redarken those divots that I accidentally filled up earlier. Of course, we'll come back to his ribs later when we're doing the bones. Well, now he can have metal ribs. He can be a Necron in disguise. That's one of the fun things about old school Warhammer, was that the dividing line between 40k and the old world was not that big. There was a pretty heavy implication that some of the Chaos Warriors were actually Chaos Space Marines, including a weapon dedicated to Khorne, which was literally a chainsword. I don't know, I think I'm happy with the universes being kind of sharing the Chaos Gods and stuff like that, but being ultimately unlinked, I think. I mean, there have been games before that have done, like, the unified thing, like War Machine. War Machine and Hordes had compatible rule sets, so that while they were technically different games, a War Machine army could play against a Hordes army. Now, apparently with the most recent edition of War Machine, they've semi-done, well, they haven't done away with it, but they've basically gone, look, Hordes is War Machine now. You can still play your armies, you can still play against each other, but apparently they've kind of unified it. They've just said, it's all one thing now. And some people have said that's good. I think other people said it's not as good. I don't know. I never really played either. I know War Machine was a weird game. Well, is a weird game. It's still around. But I just remember, like, I remember when it was really big. I remember, like, the early 2010s. So many people were touting that thing as, like, it's the end of Warhammer. It's the end of Warhammer as the top dog of war games, right? Like, the game's just better, and Privateer are gonna surpass GW. And then they didn't. And then it was Fantasy Flight. It was Fantasy Flight with X-Wing and with Star Wars. What was it called? Their skirmish one, is it Shatterpoint? No, Shatterpoint came out later. I don't remember what their skirmish one's called. But those were both selling really well, and everyone was like, "Oh, they're the ones. They're gonna take the crown from GW. It's gonna be." And I mean, to be fair, that was a reasonable expectation because Star Wars is a hot property, right? Star Wars has universal cultural relevance. Everyone knows who it is. So people were like, "Oh yeah, like if any game's gonna overtake Games Workshop, it's gonna be Star Wars." But then that didn't either. So, I mean, as much as everyone gives Games Workshop shit, some of it rightfully deserved, some of it over-exaggerated, they're clearly doing something right if no one's been able to topple them. And I know there's going to be people out there crying foul that it's because they overcharge everyone and have supposedly shady business. Some of the business practices are a bit fucked. I'll admit that. But some stuff gets just hilariously over-exaggerated. Thanks to the internet rumor mill. Also, it's not exactly like Disney, the owners of Star Wars, are, shall we say, renowned for their saintly business practices. Ah, Bunny Knight, welcome in. How you doing? Hello, hello. How are you? We're chilling out tonight. We're just listening to some synthwave and painting some skeletons. I hope you're well. Ah. Well, my commiserations that you had to work, but congratulations on making it home. Alright. These guys are looking pretty good. They'll need to wait for the wash to dry. Actually, this one looking like it might be... Yeah, this guy's good to go. I'm going to throw some scrag on him. Yeah, no problems. Now, how have you been? I hope that everything's going good. Have you been keeping up with Cyberpunk? I've been playing it a bit. I played it last stream actually, but I've been having a couple of issues with. Oh, you got stung by a jellyfish. Oof. Well, I hope you're feeling better. Yes, no, I've been lucky enough to, despite living by the ocean for my entire life, I've been lucky enough to avoid getting stung by a jellyfish. Thankfully, I'm too far south for the dangerous ones. Gotta go up north to get those, but you know, the local ones will still give you a sting, which is, again, I'm happy to have avoided. But I'm assuming if you got stung by a jellyfish, you were at the beach having a good time. Ooh, yeah. I don't know, jellyfish are really weird creatures. I did a stream about turtles before. I did like an animal stream. Jellyfish are on the list. I've got to get around to it. Ah, nice. Nice. Yeah, I'm going on a family vacation in about a month. So I'm going on a trip with my family. So that'll be nice. My parents and my brother and my sister-in-law and his kids. So, but yeah, I hope aside from the jellyfish, you had a good time with your mum. Let's get some Skrag Brun. Let's get that down. That's looking good. Ah. Well, I mean, at least it was on the last day and not on the first day, you know? Like, how much would it have sucked if it was the first day and you're just like, well, I gotta spend the rest of the trip being all jelly stung. Yeah, a guy at my work, kind of had something unfortunate like that happen. He went on a trip to Italy with his family. Well, his wife, actually. She counts as family. But yeah, she tripped and broke her leg, like, the first week they were there. So it was supposed to be like a 3-week holiday. And they wound up being stuck in Italy for like 5 weeks with a broken leg. So didn't really get to do any of their holiday. And then kind of came home. So that was kind of sad for him. But yeah, actually, I knew a kid in high school who had a similar thing. It wasn't a broken leg, but it was, I don't know if you might remember it, you might not, but like, oh, it had to be 15 years ago now. There was that volcano in Iceland that had the unpronounceable name, and it erupted and it like cancelled all the flights in Europe for like a week. So he'd been visiting family in, I believe, Poland, and was due to come back, and then the volcano thing happened and he was stuck in Europe for like an extra 2 weeks. That's looking good. But yeah, I'm assuming aside from the jellyfish, it all went well. No volcano mishaps on your holiday. What did you get up to? Just chilling on the beach, or going adventuring, going shopping? I don't know. I don't tend to do relaxing holidays. I tend to go places and do things a lot. Ah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little bit obvious. You're not really going to find a jellyfish on land, are you? Scrag down. Oh, that sounds like it's raining outside. I thought that might be the case. I heard the coals calling earlier. Ah, yeah. Oh no, I understand that. I get home from work each day and I spend like an hour just decompressing. Like no decisions, no nothing, just brain need to uncompress, be no more like spring. Ah, nice. What's the plan? What's on the menu for pew pew pew? Come on. That's looking good. I can't remember. Are you a Valorant player? I can't remember. I raid into a lot of different people and they play different games, some of which I do play and some of which I don't. Ah, Apex. Yes. Okay. I used to play Apex. I stopped playing after I started streaming just because I don't have the time to play it anymore. I was never very good. Who's your main of preference? I was usually a lifeline, Rampart, or what's her face? Not Curie. Who's the one who puts down the electric fences? Octane. Yeah, Watson, that's it. I like Fuse. I don't play as Fuse. But I like Fuse just because of how belligerently Australian he is. You know, g'day mates. Oh look, a little Prezi for Fusey. Also, I loved how who's the one who has the drill spike thing? What's her name? Mad Maddie or something like that? I loved that arc where she had a feud with him because she's from New Zealand, and I just thought that was the best setup of, like, Mad Maggie, that's it. I just love the idea of the setup of the Australian guy having somehow wronged the insane New Zealander who's out to kill him. Yes, I stopped playing before she became a playable character, so I've never actually tried her out or seen her in action. I've just seen bits and pieces around because I saw the release of, like, oh look, she's in the game now. It's like, okay. It's a little bit closer to camera. What's your preferred run for Apex? Do you go duos or trios? I was mainly a trios guy. I need all the help I can get. Ah, yeah, okay. See, I was the opposite. I had no one else to play with. So, I mainly went randoms. Which could be interesting. My greatest pet peeve was anyone who'd, like, insta-lock Wraith or Octane or Reaper and then would just, like, immediately leave the team. Like, you'd land and someone would just run away. Yep. I know that feeling. I used to play League of Legends back in the day. Back when Australia had the reputation as being the most toxic server. So I understand that very well. Alright. These guys are looking pretty good. I'm gonna hit them with the orange. Yeah, back in the day, probably about 2011, 2012-ish. Oh yeah, all good. All good. I'm glad you dropped by to say hi. If you're obviously got more pressing things like being shot at, I understand. I frequently do that. I'll have a game on, and in between matches I'll, like, kind of dip into chat, say some things, and then rapidly disappear in order to get into a lobby. But yeah, back around like 2012, 2013, they did like a ranking, and they were like, yeah, Oceania server was ranked as like #1 most toxic. Well, I mean, on the upside, get shot enough and then you don't have to go into work tomorrow, so... Troll Slayer Orange, exactly what I wanted. But yeah, I can definitely think of worse things to do after my work day. Let's get some orange. This might look a little bit weird, considering that I've been doing mainly browns and we're suddenly cutting to orange. It will actually look reasonable once we start getting it on. There we go. We want to go for the highest points. Get a little bit too heavy, but it'll do. Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay. Oop, that left side of the chest plate. That's fine. It's feeling a little bit too wet. A creepy wet scale, we're landing a little bit too wet. Done. Yeah, there we go. That's rust. Hang on, let's zoom in a bit. Zoom in and get the autofocus on. Yeah. Still don't know why the autofocus doesn't quite get perfect fixture, but yeah, we're getting a lot of depth on that. I'm happy. Let's pick up those high points. Man, I'd never heard that last line of Holographic Heart. Interesting. I've been listening to that album like non-stop for a week now. I miss it. Yes, I missed that fan brace. I always miss the fan brace. Need some more orange. This is the thing. Orange looks like it should be very stark. However, orange is a notoriously thin pigment. So, because I'm dry brushing it on, the brown will kind of show through and moderate it. Put some photos of these guys up on Twitter after I'm done, because we get a better look at it. Fortunately, the webcams are not fantastic for fully capturing the color. They wash it out just a little bit. Man, the unit champion's really popping. My man's popping off. Let's go with that orange. With that brown. I think once we get the robes layered and washed, yeah, these guys are gonna look real nice. Alright, well, these guys have got the orange done. I think I'm just gonna stick with these three for the rest of the night. It's probably only gonna go for a little bit longer. So it's time for my next secret. This is my other trick to doing rust. Is absolutely slept on. If it's in the drawer. Ooh, don't tell me it's not in the drawer. It's not in the drawer. Alright, I'm gonna have to send this to the BRB screen real quick to grab some stuff next door. And we're back. And I have my 3 secret weapons. Well, sort of. Wagon Orange. Wagon Orange absolutely slaps for doing rust. Absolutely slept on paint, because no one ever wants to wash things orange. But for rust, phenomenal. So I usually do my orange first, so I get my coat of Troll Slayer on, and then I'll usually hit it with a nice liberal amount of Fuegan. As you can see, it's already starting to get that orange to pop. I'm usually pretty heavy with it because, again, orange is a thin pigment, so the browns will hold their own. Yeah, and you can already see, look how much that orange is coming through. Really, this is more of a glaze than a wash, but tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Let's do the helmet and the Aventail. Maybe a little bit too heavy. Okay. Yeah, but look at that already. Like, look how orange that's gone now. Phenomenally rusty boy. Some of that back a little bit. Ooh. Oh, my back's really gonna be sore after this. I need a better setup. Shrimp mode is engaged. Get some more wash on the back of the helmet there. Yep, I think that's most of us. A little bit more on the side of that Aventail there. Okay. Oh, and the back of the shoes. Don't forget his footsies. Get a little bit on the inside of the leg there. It's got some natural shading going on, but that's... Alright. Let those dry. Then we'll hit it with the Rise of Rust and the Necron compound. So I realize this is not exactly the quick and dirty way of doing Rust, in that it's taken me like 7 different paints. But you can do this with less steps than I. You can literally do this with 3 if you want. I just take it through the whole shebang to get that nice gradient that I like. I want to make sure my washes are dried. This one's got a little bit more time to go. Ugh. Yeah, this is the guy who was, I think, a little bit... Yeah, this is the guy who got a little bit too much spray on his shield. So details are a bit clogged. It's okay, I can live with it. Shit happens. While we're waiting, this guy's almost dry, so I'm just gonna throw him over here for a sec. Let's do a quick comparison. So here's him next to the other dudes who I haven't finished. Let's just get them lined up. Like, look how much brighter he is. Grab him by the sword, like, look at that rust. And the texture on the armor. Compared to, say, this guy who's got a bit of texture on him. So I could have just left it at that. But this just looks very brown. Whereas these guys, like, they really pop. Alright, this guy he's pretty close to being dry. He's dry in the important areas. So let's grab our dry brush once more. Give it a quick dry. Get more of that moisture out of it. Flip our paper around. Probably won't need to do as much. So Rise of Rust is actually a dry paint. Well, technically it's a technical paint now. They moved it. I've got the old version. This is dry paint. This is Rise of Rust. So Rise of Rust is actually, it's not as dry as a dry paint. So you can see in the pot. This is Necron Compound. So it looks all gluggy and thick. That's because it is. That's the point. You won't get much out if you load your brush up on it. Rise of Rust is thinner. Still pretty thick, but it's thinner. So let me just... Rise of Rust actually has little bits of grit in it. And it's a different shade to
We harmonize, we synchronize, we are the...
There we go. So a good combo with let's stipple this on. A good combo with Rise of Rust is actually Typhus Corrosion. Typhus Corrosion has grit in it as well. It applies texture. And then Rise of Rust will grip onto that. And I'm just throwing little dabs of this on just to get kind of that speckling going. Hopefully. There we go. So that guy's looking very, very bright. It's interesting, Rise of Rust looks similar. It looks very similar to Troll Slayer. But when you actually get it on, it's very different. It's a little bit more, for lack of a better word, it's more of a peachy orange. That should do. Again, we're going for a rough stipple here. Yeah, it's fine. Big blob on the spike, that's fine. Also, I fucking love Magic Sword guitar solos. Ooh, that's a bit too much. That'll do, but oh, I can make do with that. Yeah, that was, I had a little bit too much loaded in the brush there. Well, this guy gets an extra rusty helmet. That's fine. Cloth will need to tidy up, that's fine. Yeah, that's good. That's building up on the high areas like I want. I don't know what sorcery's in Rise of Rust, but it seems to behave a little bit differently, which is a good thing. It likes to hit on those high points. So we'll come back in later and we'll redo the bones, and that'll give us a nice neutral that I think will help crisp it up a bit. Just grab a little bit more Rise of Rust. Oop. That was a bit of a heavy load. Let's see how this goes. Oh man, the contrast between that's really good. The dark on one side and the bright on the other. I like that. Let's build that up. Yeah, the spike will be a high point. Yeah, shield time. I'll reload just to up that shield. Oh yeah, that's looking real good. I know I'm saying that a lot, but what can I say? I'm happy with the results I have obtained. Through the application of sound methodology, we have obtained some very rusty boys. Clean out the brush. However, rust, unfortunately, can look a little bit bland because it's just various shades of brown and orange. Get that brush dried. So as you can see, yeah, it's looking good. Get him in the light. Let's get the autofocus. Come on. Yeah, there we go. So it's looking good. However, still needs some contrast. So we'll bring in something cool for a contrast. In that case, we're going to use Necron Compound that I mentioned earlier. So it's a dry paint, so you kind of just stick your brush in and it'll kind of, as you can see, it automatically kind of goes on pretty sparse on the bristles. I've got a bit of orange in that, that's fine. Start off with this guy. Just start by brushing the edge of that sword. So as you can see, we've now brushed that back. And let's just put a little bit of silver on there. Very, very lightly. Very, very lightly. So now it's giving that little highlight on the tip. Makes it look sharp. Put a spike on the shield. Very, very light. Let's go around the edges very, very lightly. Center rib on the armor. Shoulder guard because he'll get hit there. And then around the back, a little bit there. And the Aventail. So you want this to kind of be relatively random in most parts, but you can also focus it on certain areas, so I'm just going random there, but on the sword, for instance, I'm focusing very much around the spine of the blade and also the actual edge, because that's where they'd actually sharpen it and thus remove rust from it. Maybe his shoes a little bit as well. This just brightens things up a little bit. It gives that, again, that little bit of just a metallic impression. Makes it look like he's actually wearing armor as opposed to brown. A bit more. Oh, yeah, that looks good. As you can see, that pops a lot more now. We'll load up a little bit more. The thing I really like about Necron Compound is a little bit can actually go quite a long way. Actually, probably got a little bit too much here. As before, I really rate the dry paints. I think they're great for dry brushing. They make life substantially easier. You don't waste as much paint. Yeah, really good for getting this sort of delicate, just slight touch application. Really bring out those subtle highlights, or attempt to. I'm kind of going a little bit heavy on this one, I think. Tip of the spear. I think the tip of the spear is a bit more important than the edge, because it's where the eye is going to be drawn naturally, as opposed to a sword. This guy's armor is probably going to be a little bit brighter than some of the others, I think, but that's okay. Maybe he's just a bit more recently deceased. And again, rust really depends on things like how it's lying exposed in the ground or whatever, so... And also I can darken down this down with another wash as well, if I need to. That one's looking pretty good. I think we'll just finish off the unit champion. And we might call it. Might have to take him off the holder to actually get under that sword. It's fine. Let's get his chainmail. Well, scale mail. Aventail. Get around that hole. Chest hole. That's recent, that'll be brighter. Up around his spike. Shoulder pads. Embrace. The edge of the sword. And the shield. I feel like maybe I should have stuck with a little bit more heavy rust on the shield, but that's okay. Let's get him off the holder just so I can get under the edge and do the sword, the edge. Don't know why I suddenly turned into a New Zealander. Just probably brushed the edge, bro. Oh, you're Nagash. You're the Lord of the Undead, hey, bro. Alright, there we go. Well, I'm gonna wash my brush. I'm gonna find someone to raid. We're gonna call it there. I'm gonna get some photos of these guys and put them up on Twitter, so you all can see the comparison. Whoop. That is a cable, not a washcloth. Thank you. I need to wipe my brush off. I'll probably soap this brush before next session. Okay then. Let's see. Raid. Who's on? Ooh, Vivi is playing Slay the Princess, but I don't want to spoil myself for that. Let's go Sorelia. Alright. Sorelia Melly. Alright. I'm going to send you over to our also Australian B. They're playing Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War Soulstorm. So, I mean, it's technically Warhammer. Yeah, thanks for sticking around tonight to watch me paint skeletons. We'll be back Saturday over on Boyson's channel doing Phasmophobia, so feel free to drop by for that. All right, bye.